Psalm 12 is a psalm that I find very powerful. I entitle it Smooth Talkers Whom Oppress, and the focus on those people whose tongues are smooth with words, but their hearts corrupt, who oppress the poor, is so potently described in this psalm. I'm recording this as a special because in doing the class this morning, I had some Zoom glitches, and I wanted to make sure that it was all presented clearly because Psalm 12 is so powerful. Let me read the psalm to you, a psalm that focuses on smooth talkers. For the conductor over Sheminit, a psalm of David. Deliver Adonai, for the pious person is finished. The loyal have vanished from among humanity. Falsehood, each person speaks to his or her neighbor with smooth lips, with two hearts do they speak. May Adonai cut off all smooth lips, the tongue that speaks of grandiosity. Those who say with our tongue, we will prevail, our lips are our own. Who can master over us? Because of the plunder of the poor, because of the groans of the needy, I will now arise, says Adonai. I will grant deliverance at whom they snort. The sayings of Adonai are pure words, as silver purged in an earthen crucible, refined 7 times. You, Adonai, protect them. Keep them secure from this generation forever. Let the wicked roam in circles when the scorned are exalted among humanity. Now, what in this particular psalm I look to highlight is the nature and challenge of translation, and more specifically, how translations are interpretations. Both those words mean bridge of language, translation and interpretation. And that's most evident in the concluding verse. And we'll look at that more closely. But first, some comments as to structure. This verse, 9 verses, the first verse is really an introduction. And then there's 4 and 4 verses. And the hinge is between verses 5 and 6. Verse 5, those who say, with our tongue we will prevail. Our lips are our own. Who can master over us? That description of the evil who have no sense of any accountability. And then verse 6, which is God's response. Interestingly, responding not just to language, but even more toward oppression. You see, the Psalter is focused on the language of the oppressor, but what gets God to react is the deeds against the poor. Verse 6, because of the plunder of the poor, because of the groans of the needy, I will now arise, says Adonai. I will grant deliverance at whom they snort. And so smack in the middle is this contrast between those who feel unaccountable and God responding to their deeds. There's symmetry throughout. As looking carefully at the psalm, you see the artistry of the Psalter. It's, if you will, an envelope, verses 2 and the last, verse 9, both end with the word mibnei Adam, from humanity. And so that encapsulates this psalm. And there are pairs that are in contrast to each other. Verses 3, falsehood. Every person speaks to his or her neighbor. Sfat chalakot, smooth tongues. Belev, velev, yedaberu, with 2 hearts do they speak. And verse 7, Imrot Adonai, Amarot Tehorot. The sayings of Adonai are pure words, and you can also hear a quality of rhyming. As silver purged in an earthen crucible, refined 7 times. And so the contrast, verses 3 and 7, symmetrically. are the falsehoods of the evil. And verse 7, God's words, in contrast, refined, pure. And Rashi, the classic biblical commentator, will say of verse 7 that that refers to words of Torah, which is the antidote, the protective shield against the words of falsehood. And so 3 and 7 are in parallel, and verses 4 and 8 also have a symmetry to them. Verse 4, may Adonai cut off all smooth lips, the tongue that speaks of grandiosity. Now here, the Hebrew, Yachret Adonai, cut out, can also mean, and is usually used in biblical Hebrew to mean stop or excise, more metaphorically than physical violence. But here there's that double entendre of having spoken in the previous verse, verse 3, of those smooth lips that are the products of double-hearted intention. Here, Yachrit can be almost violent, taken literally. Cut off all smooth lips, the tongue that speaks of grandiosity. And that's paired with verse 7. So you can see again this kind of symmetry. The sayings of Adonai are pure words. I mean, verse 8, not 7. You protect them, Adonai, keep them secure from this generation forever. So verse 4, cut off their lips. Verse 8, keep them safe. So this psalm is very purposeful in its structure and repetition of words that focus on language. Multiple times, those words, you have 4 times the use, you have 3 times daber, speak, 3 times fatayim, lips, 4 times amar, say, 2 times lashon, in a very short psalm. If you add all that up, that's 12 times this focuses of speech and tongue and lips. Oi, the smooth talker. And yet, the punchline, verse 9, is so uncertain. So now I'm going to put up a number of translations for Psalm 9. And I'm going to share with you how there is ambiguity in translation. I think of Chaim Bialik, the great Israeli poet, that said to read a translation is like to kiss a bride through a veil, which means you're never quite fully in contact. Or again, how here, with the language of poetry, often words that are rare, it's hard to know how to make sense of them. In some cases, I'm going to start at the back with Robert Alter. He has a remarkably different kind of reading of Psalm 12:9. All around go the wicked. That part's about the same. They have dug deep pits for the sons of men. He acknowledges that this seems to be a corrupted text because the last 4 words, Karum Zulut, Livnei Adam, don't quite make sense. And he says, it's really the first 2 letters, Kuf, Kaf Reish, that's for digging. And the Mem, it was probably used for the Hebrew word for a hole, and that they got, mitzudit, like a trap, and that somehow those got put together, and Zalut is, to do it deep, is to do it deeply, because Zalut means lowly. So you can see the wicked Roman circles, okay, but when the scorned are, they have dug deep pits for the sons of men, sounds very different. So now let me start with how they usually sound. New Jewish Publication Society, but you'll also see the key word matters. On every side, the wicked roam. So the word saviv in Hebrew means around. Rishaim is wicked. Third word, yehalchun, is to go. And see now the wicked, around wicked go, okay? And then here's the ellipsis, the uncertainty, a missing piece. Karum can have as its root leherim, meaning to elevate, here often translated as exalted. Zalut means lowly, from the word like zol, to cheapen. So how do you, the elevated, the lowly, livnei adam, among people, among humanity. So New Jewish Publication Society, the most popular translation in the Jewish academic world, it's the translation in our synagogue's Eitz Chaim. On every side the wicked roam, when baseness is exalted among men. So it's baseness as the focus. Likewise, Benjamin Siegel, who I like so much, his translation is similar. Roundabout the wicked roam, as vileness is exalted among humankind. So here it's like baseness, it's vileness that gets exalted, allowing the wicked to roam. And Benjamin Siegel will comment that this is an unusual psalm and that it reverts to the beginning. It reverts to the beginning in terms of, in the beginning, the vileness is prospering, the wicked are doing well against the righteous. And here, there's a sense of incompleteness for Benjamin Siegel, as if the Psalter is saying, I made this plea, I am making this plea because the problem is ongoing. And that's one way to read Psalm 9. It comes full circle to the beginning to identify an ongoing problem. But look at Art Scroll. Instead of it being vileness is exalted, it's the basest of men. Art Scroll is the Orthodox, even ultra-Orthodox translation, popular in America. The wicked walk on every side when the basest of men are elevated. So here it's people who are elevated. And in that time where base people are elevated, then the wicked walk on every side. And you might contrast Rishaim, which are wicked, with basest, Zlut, which are lowly. Lowly in terms of no real sensibility of refinement. So a time in which the unrefined are calling shots, the evil prosper. Likewise, and for me kind of ironic, is that the closest translation of the Orthodox is to King James. The wicked walk on every side when the vilest men are exalted. Okay, that's focused on men. But there's another way, which is like the opposite understanding, and that is Mitsuda. And I like the Mitsuda. It's a linear translation. The wicked walk on every side. Again, that first part is the same. When the scorned are exalted among the sons of men. So here it flips the subject. So the Zalut are the scorned who are elevated. Because it's ambiguous. Are you talking about vile people when you say the cheapened ones? Or are you talking about the ones who are cheapened by other people? And I, therefore, prefer viewing this final line in a very different way, which is as a jussive. You see, here's also a problem with translation. Namely, in Hebrew, there are only two tenses, and they're often overlapping. In English, we have past, present, and future. In Hebrew, you have perfect and imperfect. The perfect tense is the present to the past, that's perfect. Imperfect, the imperfect tense, is the present to the future, except in poetry, sometimes the imperfect flips to the past, and grammatically, you can also have what's called jussive. which is let. And that's how I choose to translate the last two verses. You protect them, Adonai. You, Adonai, protect them. Keep them secure from this generation forever. So that's a plea. And it continues as a plea. Let the wicked roam in circles when the scorned are exalted among humanity. So it's looking to the future, to God, saying, God, bring a just end. I just want to share one more translation, and then I'll pull this together, only because I found it, again, a interesting way to translate, and it's from a popular Christian translation called the New International Version. But as you look at it, you'll see that they've kind of conflated verses 8 and 9, though the result is a certain kind of fluid translation. You, Lord, will keep the needy safe and will protect us forever from the wicked, ostensibly verse 8, who freely strut about when what is vile is honored by the human race. So that verse 9 becomes a description of the wicked. Without spending more time, though more time could be spent, looking at how these different translations impact on meaning, what I would highlight is the challenge of those who are working with a translation, thinking that it's the only way to understand the biblical verse. That's not only true for Psalms, that's true for reading Bible. When people tell me, this, whatever, fill in the blank, this is what it says in the Bible, and this is God's word. As somebody who's used to parsing the Hebrew and knowing the variety of understanding of the sages of Hebrew, I pause with humility to know that there is ambiguity in Hebrew, ambiguity in any verse, but more, all the more, for a psalm, there is ambiguity. And I would say sometimes that ambiguity is intentional. So back to Psalm 9. I think the Psalter might have said two things at once because both are so powerful. And that is that when the base are in charge, people who are not scrupulous in what is said and done, there's this quality of lacking care, then the evil, they control. They walk around you in circles. That's one way to understand it. But the other is as a petition, which is, may they who are of smooth lips, where nothing sticks to their lips, nothing, they hold themselves unaccountable because for them there is no God, and for them their words are only a tool, if you will, a weapon, and nothing sticks. They won't admit even to what they've said. Well, God, cut out those tongues, cut out those lips, a little bit violent. And when that occurs, then the lowly will be exalted. They will be elevated as they rightfully are. And the wicked, they'll just walk in circles. They will be aimless, purposeless. One commentator said of walking in circles that people who are very hedonistic, Moses Schreiber, a commentator, 1762 to 1839 in Frankfurt, said, his other more popular name is the Khatam Sofer, the evil lead futile lives. They eat and drink to have strength to earn money, so as to have money in order to eat and drink. In that sense, it's all circular. It's all about feeding their sense of the physical. And that's what allows them to have no conscience. It's all about the immediate moment. And so in some, verse 9 could be both simultaneously. And that's the power of poetry. Is that what the Psalter originally intended? That we will not know. But as is the nature of poetry, We take a psalm and we make it our own. For me, this psalm, Psalm 12, is among the most powerful, precisely because of its focus on the smooth tongues of evildoers with divided hearts, calling on God to change that reality, and the ambiguity of that psalm with its last verse, so clear until that last verse, because ultimately that's the nature of people with two hearts and a smooth tongue. We're left to plead with God, and we're left simultaneously to worry. Thank you. Thank you. I look to join you as our study continues.